So Ian, thank you for joining us. First ever guest on the i2i podcast. No pressure whatsoever. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's been a busy time, especially with lockdown and everything. So just kind of chugging along here, which is good. But everything's going well right now.
So Ian, take us right back to where it all began for you then. How did you first get into football?
Well, for me, anyways, with football wise, funnily enough, I never started playing club. I'm sure a lot of people out there started playing club when they were younger and stuff like that, especially in America. Playing club at a young age. I didn't start playing club until I was around, what was it, seventh grade. But when I initially got into football was when I was about 10, 11 years old. Actually, one of my buddies, I've actually played goalkeeper my whole life. So one of my buddies actually saw me play on like the school playground. And I ended up going with him with like rec teams and stuff like that. And then after that, I was like, oh, I could probably take this further if I wanted to. So I just kept continuing with it. And I joined my first club team on, I believe, my seventh grade year. Actually quit in my eighth grade year, and then had basically a one-on-one coach who actually played D1 college ball. Played with him. He kind of taught me everything that I know today. And then I kind of went through it. Actually, in my junior year, I decided to come back to club. And then I made the best team at CCV, which was my old club. I was originally at the white team when they had three teams. So I was on the lowest team, made my way up, got to the black team. Once I was on the black team, I kind of just kept stuck with it. So it's been quite a journey. And then i2i kind of found me through actually a showcase game, which was up in Nevada, I believe. It was up in Las Vegas. Got an email off them, and I decided to come over here for the taster trip.
So how did you become about being a goalkeeper then? How did that come about?
I don't know. It kind of, funnily enough, it kind of came naturally to me. I was always, especially in American football and stuff like that, I always like being like receiver and I always like doing that kind of thing. But whenever it came down to soccer, it was always, I always liked being the goalkeeper. I don't know. I was one of those weird ones that I always liked being the last person, I guess, that didn't mind getting all the blame sometimes. Um, but I was just kind of a lunatic, I guess. I don't really know. I always liked being in front of it and kind of being that kind of hero or goat personally.
We'll come on to that crazy goalkeeper bunch later on. So at what point did you think, you know what, I'm actually really enjoying this and want to pursue this further into college?
I would say I always kind of knew, I guess, in some senses, especially when I started taking it more seriously with that one guy that I was saying that played Division One in college. Um, I just kind of, took it and was like, all right, like he always did one-on-ones with me whenever I was in high school. I think a lot of my other people around me, I don't give them enough credit, but definitely my coaches definitely pushed me. They saw something, I guess, in me that I didn't see in myself until later down the road. Um, but yeah, no, it was just one of those things that was just kind of like keep going, and then something might happen. Who knows? And then I think that one realization that I wanted to really stick with it, and maybe I might actually have to have a chance to go somewhere, would have been my junior year when I made that top team on CCV. I mean, for me, it was just like an eye opener because I never thought I would ever make it. And neither did a couple of my buddies actually who ended up playing with me that went to the same school that I did. So it was always one of those kind of things that was like, all right, maybe I can take this somewhere. I wonder how far I can take it, and I just kind of got my head down and kept going with it.
So I know you mentioned it briefly a minute ago, but how and when did you first hear about i2i and what were your initial thoughts on the program at that point, if you can remember?
Well, I mean, when I initially heard them from i2i, so like I said, I was actually up in a regional tournament in Las Vegas. We came up from Arizona, played a whole tournament there. i2i actually saw me play. And then from there, I kind of got funnily enough, I actually remember which game it was from. I'm sure that we'll mention it later about the team that I play with and stuff. He was actually on the original Reds team. Rudy actually was on there. I was actually playing against him when I actually got that email. So he was on Blackhawk, I was on TCV, funnily enough. But
Who,
initially I
who
was kind
won?
of like, pardon me?
Who won?
I think we did actually that game. It
Never,
was kind of
never
a
in
tough
doubt.
one.
Never in doubt.
Yeah, I know. I can't live that one down, but he always gets me for the semifinals for State Cup. That's for sure. But I mean, so we ended up kind of coming over, seeing everything else. I mean, initially I didn't think it was real, neither did my parents. We kind of obviously looked into it, everything else like that. Brand new, academy, especially internationally wise here. I know you guys are well known for domestic wise. But internationally wise, we were like, all right, well, what is this place? And then we were like, all right, might as well take a risk. So I decided to come over here and check it out, and then that's kind of led one thing to another. When
Yeah,
ended up
that leads
joining
me
the
on.
program.
That leads me on nicely onto the next question, actually. So obviously you came on a stage trip. I think it was March 2016, I believe it was.
Yeah,
That was the first time I met you, actually. One of the many different hairstyles you had back then as well. How was that experience for
hey,
you?
I over the last 4 years, I think I've had the most amount of hairstyles I think I've ever had in my life. I had the homeless hairstyle, which is great because thousands of people have seen that one.
Yeah,
And then I've also got the man bun. I've had loads and loads of others. Hopefully, I'm sticking with this one finally. So
yeah. So how was the taste trip for you? That experience?
it was good. It was good. It was definitely something different. Especially the professionalism and everything else like that. Funnily enough, I did. So I did play with Jono and Brian for like the next few years, and as well as I did meet them on there. Ingy wasn't actually part of that program at the time. He didn't come on until I believe it was in the summer. So he actually didn't get to take a look at me or Matt. But I was actually with Nelly at the time. And with Nelly, anyways, I got to know Nelly. We all knew each other and, kind of progressed from there. And a lot of guys from that Taster trip actually ended up coming onto the program. So I knew actually a lot of them. One of my roommates, actually, Brian Hernandez, was actually on that Taster trip. He was my roommate.
Chopper
So
himself.
when
Chopper
I came on the
himself.
program, I knew exactly who he was. But yeah, no, it was good. It was something else that's definitely different. It's one of those things that you've got to go over and experience yourself. I know, especially right now with the world, that COVID and everything else like that, it's quite hard. But for me, that coming here kind of solidified my decision of like, I actually kind of want to come here and experience the program because at York St. John as well as for a 3-year program, it's for me at the time it was only York St. John. But for like a 3-year program, for me, it's more worth it than going back to the U.S. and trying to get a bachelor's degree in 4 years as well.
What were your first impressions of England? I mean, coming from Arizona, I'm guessing cold.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm used to like 48 degrees Celsius or things like 120 degrees Fahrenheit, on average. So it was definitely quite a transition, especially weather-wise. I was absolutely freezing. So I know what I did for me anyways, is I always wore like a sweatshirt and I would just make myself suffer so I could get acclimatized to it as fast as I could. So, this is one of those things, but it was definitely a change. It was a good change, I think. Because I feel like here, especially in the UK, everything's quite close and everything else like that. Whereas in Arizona or anywhere else in the US and most places, it's you got to drive everywhere. Everything's nice and spacious and everything else like that. It's definitely a change that is for the better.
So in terms of making a decision on where to commit your future to, then did the trip make your mind up in a way? And did you have any other options on the table? And if so, like what were they? Were you kind of stuck where to commit to?
Yeah, I definitely was kind of stuck where I was commit to. I did have a few offers on the table. I was actually going to be a walk-on for a Division II college, and as well as I actually had an offer at a team called what was it? Wow, my buddies went there. Embry-Riddle, which is up in Prescott. I also had a little bit of an offer there, but it kind of solidified my decision to come here. I think I also had an offer in Nebraska as well, if I remember correctly. One of the guys wanted me to come over and actually visit and see if I liked the college or not. But definitely, the taster trip definitely solidified my thing. And especially one of the biggest things I think for me was definitely how long the season was, and as well as game time. I think I was fortunate enough to understand, the only way that I was going to develop is with game time, especially with a goalkeeping standpoint. Game time is always key. So for me, it was like 40 games a year. Even if I get half of those, that's more than most freshmen even get in college in the U.S. because they're always either 3 or 4 rosters, spots deep. The seniors are always playing before them. So it's like I don't want to get stuck on a practice team and then get all the way over my senior year, and then some new hot shot comes along and then absolutely takes my spot or something along those lines. Now, obviously that, I feel like that would be kind of like, well, some people would say like, well, you don't want the competition. It's like, no, I do want the competition. But for me, in my eyes, in the US, especially college wise, they kind of use you and then discard you. It's not so much like you're being developed. We're using you for your purpose, and then we're just getting rid of you essentially.
So a few months pass and you decide to make the leap of faith in September 2016 to come to York St. John from Arizona, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm guessing the weather was your first observation when you got here.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely my first observation. It's like and especially in Arizona in the summer, especially around that time, it's like, oh, I can walk around with like, shorts and a t-shirt on. And then I come here and I'm like all like bundled up. I've got like a big puffer jacket on and I'm just like, oh. So
I'm guessing you kind of liked it though, coming from the sweltering summer of Arizona to the somewhat chilly York.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things like, this is new to me. I don't know what this is, especially. But yeah, no, it was definitely nice. It was definitely a good impression, I think, for me. And as well as one thing that definitely was nice is just like, I didn't have to get a car. I didn't have to get anything else. It was like I hop on a train or I'd go over and, get on a bus or even walk. I think for me at the time I lived at Central, it was like a 5-minute walk over to Morrison's, which is a grocery store. So you just walk over to Morrison's, go to that grocery store, get whatever you need, and then just walk back. And that was kind of like, what you did.
How did you find the first few weeks and months being here? Obviously, first time away from home, in a different country, thousands of miles away from your family, 18 years old. It can be quite daunting. How did you adapt to that?
It was definitely, I think for me, I actually had a lot of smoother transitions than a lot of other guys that I see today. I talked to a lot of guys and stuff like that. For me, I was the oldest. I'm the oldest in my family, so I'm always kind of independent. I always kind of do my own kind of thing. So it's never really been that big of an issue. But I mean, even for me, I had my fair share of, homesickness. I had my fair share of, trying to get used to culture shock and everything else like that. For me, it wasn't that big of a deal, I would say. Definitely, like the first 3 months was definitely something that was just like, I gotta get used to all this. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. I'm basically been thrown into the deep end. I'm on my own now. So it's just kind of one of those things that's like, well, I'm gonna have to learn at some point how to do these things, So it was definitely kind of being thrown into the deep end, but as well, it definitely comes out with a better outcome in the end. Specifically, getting thrown into these kind of cultures and everything else like that. I think one thing that's definitely made me realize is just, especially in the first 2 weeks, was like, wow, we may speak English and we may do this, we may say that we're descendants from them, but in reality, the difference between us is uncanny. It's just night and day. It's insane.
So you mentioned you suffered with a bit of homesickness back in your early days. How did you deal with that?
I think, funnily enough, for me, I did the opposite of what everybody else kind of did. I know a lot of people kind of stayed in touch with their families and everything else like that. I did not. My parents, I love my parents. I drove them absolutely nuts. I like respond to them like maybe once a month.
Oh, wow. Don't do this, guys. If anyone's listening, this is not the way to do it.
Don't actually do that. I promise you, your parents will not like you very much for it. But I did the opposite. I think the way I kind of like to do things was definitely like immerse myself and, it really kind of experience it. Now, I did talk to my family, like I mentioned before. It's not like I just shunned them out. It wasn't like I'm not going to talk to them. Definitely did. I definitely did. And my parents would always check on me every once in a while. I mean, they still do today. So, but it's the kind of way that I deal with it. I know a lot of other guys talk to their parents every day. That's one way of dealing with it. I mean, it's all about, the individual. There's always things that can be different. It can be the same. Some people find it harder. Some people find it better. I think one always key aspect that I always say is be social. I definitely wasn't social. Like I mentioned before, I was shutting out my parents. I did that kind of like, I handled it my way. But definitely, a lot of guys, I'd say about 95% of them always are sociable, which is great. I mean, that's what you want. And especially when they're your teammates, it's always good because you're always hanging around each other. You're getting to know each other and you can really kind of form that bond and kind of support each other along the way of, that next 3 months. And usually it's kind of the beginning of the 3 months where it's kind of like, it gets kind of worse and then it gets really bad right before you go home, just because it's like, it's my first time going to be going home. after being in the UK for the last 3 months as well. So I would say it definitely takes 3 months, but the first 2 weeks, it's definitely all about interacting with individuals and kind of making sure that you know everybody and you can kind of form that bond with each other. Now, some other people, it takes more time. Like for me, it took me almost 2 years, but it's just one of those kind of things.
How did you find living in York? I mean, you must like it because you're still here now, 4 years down.
Yeah, I still am. I still am here, 4 or 5 years down. I do like it here. It's definitely small in York, and I don't need to buy I mean, I have a bicycle now, but I don't need to buy like a car or anything else like that. I can just kind of take the bus into town, and everything's really close. Even like the closest store to me is only like a 15-minute bike ride away, which is not bad. But just going to town and everything else like that, I think for me, especially just having the small town kind of feel, was definitely something that I was always looking for. Definitely different than what I'm used to.
So I'm guessing in the States you don't get many places like York. Correct me if I'm
No,
wrong.
definitely not. I mean, it's definitely like I don't know. It's interesting because like my center of town in Glendale, Arizona, where I'm from, is completely different than from the center of town York. And one thing that I always say is it's just I would say the commercial companies, for example, here. I would say York is like the kind of like, or the whole UK or York is like the Texas of America, where they have a lot of independent companies, not a lot of commercial companies like McDonald's and stuff like that. Although they are here, they're not really like kind of like the gems. You've got Evil Eye, you've got Betty's, you've got what else you got? You got a whole bunch of other places that are in there that are kind of like really good food places to stop in as well.
Yeah. So moving on to more on the field matters, I've got to ask you about Michael Ingham. I think he'd be very annoyed if he didn't get an honourable mention for at least a few minutes. How were the first few weeks and months working with him? Because as we all know, he's an interesting character, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely was. I think it was a good experience for me. I mean, it kind of took me a while to get out of my shell. I'm sure that he'll say that as well.
And Ingy does that, doesn't he? He gets people out of their shell.
Oh yeah, he definitely does. He definitely gets you out real quick and real fast. It's just one of those things. But it took me some time to get me out of my shell. I also adopted the nickname Mr. Moody. So it's pretty much self-explanatory right there. But no, with Ingy's in the aspect of goalkeeping and as well as him being my coach, I would say it's surreal, but it's one of those things that it's kind of like, for me anyways, that's what I would expect out of a coach, especially in the goalkeeping standpoint, with his experience and everything else like that. I don't think I've ever been disappointed in Ingy's coaching style, the way that he does things, and even his drills or even day-to-day drills. Although sometimes we do have those kind of boring days, but for me it's like those boring days are key because then you can switch on to more simpler things as a goalkeeper. So it's definitely one of those things. And as well as when it comes to Ingy's standpoint, I think mainly for me as well, the reason why I still get along with him today and everything else like that is just because he did teach me a lot, especially when it comes down to the mental standpoint, like I said about being Mr. Moody. I mean, a goalkeeper needs to have a good mental state, and if it's not in a good mental state, then we don't perform well. So he kind of helped me build that up, and I think I'm a lot calmer now. I'm a lot mellowed out, so to speak. But it's getting there. But he's probably one of the key reasons why I'm still into football today and still trying to play, and really would like to continue to play if I can. So that's always a nice thing. But he's always been kind of pointing me in the right direction, and I've just been kind of going. So that's always a great aspect, and as well as out of a coach, that's you really can't ask for much more than that. That's for sure.
Let's talk about the goalkeeper union. It's a special bunch, isn't it? I mean, some say a mad bunch, but I'll stick to special for now. How much did you enjoy the camaraderie and the banter in that group?
I loved it. It's definitely one of those aspects. The one nice thing about that is, like I said before, about getting people out of their shells. If it wasn't for the way that the goalkeeping union was, we would never be able to get anybody out their shells. I would definitely say it's not for everyone. But at the same time, it's one of those things that it's like, if you can't deal it with your friends, then how are you going to do it on the pitch? How are you going to have fans behind you shouting and everything else like that? How are you not going to, if you can't let your friends get in your head, what about the fans? You know, and it's kind of one of those things. At least that's my own personal opinion. So, but at the same time, I love the goalkeeping union. I mean, we're always really tight. We're always poking at each other. We're always having fun. Although we do know when it's time to take serious things serious, and it kind of does kind of have that aspect of it. We do have our fun. If something happens, we're definitely poking at each other. We're always knowing what's going on with each other. We're really a tight knit group. Now, though, one thing that I always say I like about the GK union is that as though we're tight, we also allow each other to go do our kind of like our own things. It's not like we're around each other 24/7. So that's always a good thing. And then it's like it helps us because then we can get used to each other and then kind of go on and also get to know our teammates and everything else like that. So I think definitely in the social aspect of when you are in your shell initially, the GK union can get you out of that and then kind of go over and be more social. Everybody in all like the teams now. And I think specifically too, if it wasn't for the GK union, I wouldn't be so, still talking to my buddies today with, the original red squad. I know all the guys in the orange squad. I know all the guys in the black squad. I know a lot of the guys, and I wouldn't be as social. And if it wasn't for that initial trying to get me out of my shell from the GK union, that's for sure.
You also work very closely with John Green and Brian Hughes in your time, and a little bit with Corey Roper towards the end of your journey. They all have so much experience in the game. How was it working with them on a daily basis as well?
It's definitely different. I think for me, tactically, my game wasn't developed as much. So, although I was with Ingy for an hour, whenever we jumped into like the tactical things with Brian and Ingy and all of them, and Jono, it was always trying to pay attention and try to absorb as much as you can. Especially with them, being and playing professionally, and Brian with Hull City, and as well as Jono, having that career as well with Manchester United and everything else. You really kind of, for me, if you don't pay attention, then there's something wrong with you because they've already been there, they've done it. It's one of those things that's like, if you're not paying attention to it, then why are you here? Even any of the other coaches like Blunty or anything else like that, it's like you want to pay attention to them because they've already been there, they've done it, they know what needs to expect. Now, when it comes down to it, you would always want to trust them like every single time, especially when it comes down to formation, tactically. It's one of those things that you want to absorb as much as you can. Specifically speaking with Brian, anyways, because I worked with him the longest. It was one of those things that whenever we did Rondo, whenever we did small-sided games, everything had a purpose. Same thing with Jono, whenever we were used to train with him, or Corey, or anybody else that I trained with. Everything had a purpose. It wasn't so much of, well, we're just kind of doing this just to kind of do this. Everything has a purpose, and especially if you go, well, why does this have this purpose? They've already explained it before. Even let's say if they're announced like a drill or something like that, it's like, why are we doing this? Well, it's to create this, it's to do this, it's to do that. So it's definitely different than from the US, for where it's just like you ask why you're doing it, and they go, because that's what I was told to do. And it's just like, well, how does that make any sense? If you don't know what it's for, then how is it supposed to improve us? Whereas with Jono or Ingy or even Bry, they could just come up with an answer immediately. Well, we're trying to create space, we're trying to get you to move, we're trying to make sure that you're sharp, for example, long passes. We're trying to make sure that we're trying to wear you out, for example, in a longer drill, and see how long you can stay in mentally and keep your standards up. So everything has a purpose, essentially.
So, bearing that in mind, what would you say is the biggest difference between playing in England and playing in the States? Would you say it's the level of coaching?
I would definitely say it's the level of coaching, as well as it's the style of play. For me, especially after watching, for example, USL games and stuff like that. We actually have a USL team in the US. But even after like 2 years, I think tactically my brain has kind of come more to the English game of being patient, making sure everything's accurate, everything's down to the point, everything's quick and on the floor. However, when that space comes to go over the top, then go over the top. Whereas in the US, it's just like bomb it over the top, and let's hope that the fastest guy in the front is going to get there, and he's going to take everybody on and score. Now, I'm not saying that it's not changed. It's definitely changed a little bit and starting to get there. However, that's definitely the main thing, and that's one of the things why I think MLS especially is taking a lot of internationals, because Americans, they don't know what they're doing. I'll say it. We have no idea what we're doing. It's just one of those things. So I just wish it would just kind of develop more, but definitely even on the coaching standpoint, how many people in the US can say that, I've actually coached by a Premier League guy. I've been coached by 3 Premier League guys, and as well as with Corey, he played for, I think, Leeds U21, if I remember correctly, for a while. So, not many people can say that. And as well as for me, you can definitely tell the difference of the game that's instilled in me and the game that's instilled in a lot of the other American guys. When I went home for Arizona, for example, my coaches had no idea who I was. And because my brain, the way that it functioned was so much more the UK game, I absorbed so much more here because I have a 9-month season. So I can absorb a lot more rather than a 3-month season. So I developed at an exponential rate. I mean, although I wasn't the best goalkeeper, that's definitely true. You can ask me about that. I don't know how I even got here, but I'll take it. But it's just definitely one of those things. But when it comes down to it, it's definitely different. The coaching aspect, the way that we're taught, that it's you're more caring about the development rather than who's the best conditioned team and who's going to win. Essentially, you're more concerned about the development, which turns into winning, which turns into being able to play on the floor and play it quick and play it fast and wear out other teams, and using your head to be like, okay, well, let's slow it down for a bit, wear them out for a bit, and then try to go over the top. Whereas in the US, just like, just bomb it over and let's hope that we can get there.
In terms of showcase matches, your cohort had opportunities in abundance, didn't you? Really, playing at Leeds United in the Global Cup, the first ever one, Liverpool Academy, Wolves Academy, to name just a few. Really, that must have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty good. It was definitely a different experience. I mean, those guys are crazy, especially when we played Liverpool. Those guys were nuts.
I mean, I think that was their under-18s academy.
They were really good. That was when I was in my second year, I believe. So that was when I was 19, 20. But they were really good. Those guys knew exactly how to play. And, I think for me, it kind of set me a benchmark. I know we absolutely got battered at the Liverpool game. But we ended up playing Wolves, I think U18 later that week, and we ended up bringing a different squad. I was part of that squad as well. We ended up actually winning against Wolves. But definitely, it kind of gives you a good benchmark just to kind of see where I wanted to be and where I should be now. I have, Ingy has told me that I'm going to be a late bloomer and everything else like that, which is fine. I mean, that's something I definitely want to. I'll definitely take in consideration. That's why I think that's one of the reasons why I want to keep going. It's just to see where I'm going to be at. But it definitely gave me a good benchmark, especially on a goalkeeping standpoint, especially on a professional standpoint of, where do I want to be? Do I want to be at this level? Do I want to be at a higher level? And although it may not come in fruition of even ever becoming a pro, who knows? But at least for me, the only thing I know how to do is just kind of keep my head down and keep going. So if I can get as far as I can, I mean, that's kind of my ultimate goal, is just to see how far I can take it. And if I can keep going, then I'll keep going. But definitely those showcase games give you a good kind of stepping stone, especially, who knows what might happen. For example, Leon, going over to Shamrock Rovers, playing against the first team, and actually ends up getting picked up and is currently playing for him. So it's just definitely one of those things that's just kind of like, who knows what's going to happen. It's all about that lucky break. So I think for me, it was more of, I always knew I never was going to get there, especially now. It's one of those things, but it's just a good benchmark of like, let's see how far I can take it. I want to be, at this level by the time I'm, whatever.
Yeah, speaking of opportunities, and I guess down to your relationship with Michael Ingham, you've actually featured for i2i semi-pro club, haven't you? Tadcaster Albion, train with them on a weekly basis. I bet you learn quite a lot from them.
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, it's always, I'm super happy that, I'm able to do that. I don't think, I'm honestly not going to ask any questions, to be honest. I'm not going to ask too many questions. But I think it's really nice, especially with them letting me on and allowing me to train with them. And luckily I had a few, I think it was showcase games with them as well. That was, one of the things I just couldn't, I never even thought I would ever, play in a lot of those games. But no, I've definitely learned a lot from those guys. I mean, they're a great bunch of guys, all of them. so much fun. And it's nice having, Ingy's now technically the number one on he is, well, not technically, he is the number one on Tagcaster.
Don't mess that up.
Yeah, don't mess that up. I'm gonna be in trouble if I say that.
You won't be listening, it's fine.
But he is the number one on Tagcaster, so it's a good benchmark to see him instead of my coach. I get to see him. I get to see Ingy as another player, and it's another good perspective. But especially see him how he does things and how the other guys does things. It's always interesting. It's definitely changed, that's for sure. The banter's totally different. Everything else changes, and I've learned a lot. And I'm glad I've been able to take the opportunity, and they've allowed me to kind of come on and train, because I've definitely learned a lot. I get along with all of them. They're all great guys, and as well as they're always poking at me, and I'm always poking at them. So it's always a great aspect of it, and I've definitely learned a lot from them. That's for sure, and I'm just happy that I could even train with them, let alone be a part of a few showcase games.
I want to talk about that original squad that you're a part of now, your original cohort. That was such a special group, wasn't it? I mean, I know we say we're like one big family, but you guys really were all so close, weren't you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think those guys are they're awesome. I'll say it right now. I think obviously I'm gonna be a little bit biased here because they're my original team. But I still love them today. I mean, we all still talk to each other. We've all got a group chat. I still talk to Brian, Marcos, Matt, Louis, all of those guys. Danny, I know I'm missing a lot of them, like Gunnar and JT and all of them, and etc. But I mean, those guys are, I mean, they're the original squad, and I definitely miss them. I wish they were around more, and it was definitely an aspect of it. They were always great guys. I mean, I think one thing that I always see is definitely the difference between our squad and a lot of other squads, and how close we were. And although I'm not saying that there are not teams here that are not close, because there definitely are. I think Orange team is a great example. Those guys are really tight. It reminds me of the Red team in some aspects. But I think with the way that we've kind of did things with the Red squad, it was a lot different. But for us, it was just kind of one of those things that we wanted to see how far we could take ourselves. A lot of the time, unfortunately, we fell short. But I think that was one thing about us, is that we always wanted to keep going. We had a weird kind of drive about us just to kind of keep going and going and going. And although we did lose our heads with each other a lot of times, there was never like a bad taste in any of our friendships. It was once it was on the pitch, it was off. Once you're off that pitch, it's gone, which was always one of my favorite aspects about us. That's for sure.
Having those close friendships where you practically did everything together as a squad, that must have made the whole experience so much more enjoyable for you.
Yeah, it definitely did. Especially with, I think my kind of thought process would be more along the lines of like, we always went out together. We always had a great time together, especially when a lot of guys went out. I wasn't so much the one that went out a lot, but whenever I did go out with the guys and, went out to the clubs or anything else like that, we always had a great time. It was always a great time. We still have videos of all of us and like the club, and we always send them in the group chat, and always are poking fun at each other still. So it's definitely great. And especially with that experience wise, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen any other whole squad go out, for example, when we went over for, what was it? It was Thanksgiving. Everybody was out for Thanksgiving. Our whole team was out for Thanksgiving. We all went over to the bar. We had like a fine system. We used that fine system to kind of like buy everything else like that. So it was definitely good. I mean, I've never seen a team personally go out as a whole team as much as we did, because we would all be like, hey, does everybody want to go out? We would all go out together, no matter who it was, no matter how many times we went out. Like 99% of the guys, we would all go out together and have a great time, which was great. We definitely had a different bond to us than I think a lot of other teams do.
Yeah, some of you guys actually went traveling around Europe, didn't you? I think it was around spring break time. How much did you enjoy having close access to Europe?
Yeah, it's definitely great. I think I was part of that trip as well. I think it was like a 3-week trip. It was me, Danny, Zach, and MJ. We all went around 3 weeks, all around Europe. Unfortunately, I think because of that, we've actually lowered it down to a few weeks, probably because of us. So my bad. But essentially we went around, I mean, all around Europe. I mean, we went Spain, France, Germany, Italy, all over the place. And it was just kind of one of those things that a lot of people don't get to do. Um, that we actually did. I mean, we were hitting almost 1 to 2 cities a day for those 3 weeks. We went over and saw a Borussia Dortmund game. We were in Milan, Rome, Venice, Paris, Monaco, Madrid, and also Barcelona. We were also in Sweden as well for a little bit. So it was also, I think we were also in Switzerland as well. So, you know, a lot of people can't say that they went all over all those places, you know, in such a short amount of time. And for me, it was just one of those things that we all, like I said before, you know, we all still like to keep in contact with each other. I think definitely that trip was worth it. I don't think a lot of Americans can say that they went basically all around Western Europe. So it was definitely a good trip.
Looking at the education side of things, what was it like studying at York St John University, and was it everything you expected?
It was definitely something different. I would definitely say that with the York St. John's perspective, I'm not used to, well, I think even in Northumbria at this point, it's not, especially in the US, it's not so much learning on your own. It's more of being spoon-fed things, and this is the kind of assignments that you have to do, and you have assignments every week. Where at York St. John, it's more kind of like, I think in the UK as a whole, it's more kind of, you know, more realistic in the sense of here's a topic, here's what we know about it. Now you need to expand that knowledge. Because for me anyways, I think in any job, you know, no matter what you do, you're going to have a job, for example, and you know that they're going to say go do this, but you're not going to know how to do it. You just have a general idea of how to do it, but you're not going to know how to do it. So you have to go out and try to find, you know, the research and everything else for it. So it makes it a bit more realistic. But as well as I'm not used to, for example, having only 2 assignments that kind of finalize my grade, that was something that was definitely an adjustment to do, because in the US, you know, we have assignments every day. It's all your classes. You've got assignments every single week that are due. Whereas here, it was just like, do your reading. If you do your reading, you'll be fine. And as well, it's more of like an educational journal kind of aspect rather than a creative kind of aspect. That was one thing that took me a little bit of time to get adjusted to. I would say one thing about the American education system is that they genuinely kind of have like a little bit more freedom in the creative kind of aspect. Now, I'm not saying that would be for every single major. I mean, computer science is a great example. You know, you got robotics and everything else like that. You got to learn how to code. You have to be really creative with that. But I mean, in the educational standpoint of, you know, like during journals and everything else like that. But obviously there's pros and cons to both, but definitely, you know, especially in the UK, I think it's a great aspect of it, because it's just like, you know, you have to go out and learn it yourself. And as well as you have to retain what you've learned and then bring it into your assignments. It's not so much like, you know, here's an assignment, kind of expand on it. Although you are supposed to expand on it, kind of like do what you think is right. If that makes sense, it's like, what are the facts? How are you going to show that? And how is that going to produce? I think, and especially when it comes down to company standpoints and business standpoints, at least for me anyways, because I have my business master's and also my bachelor's. It's just more of like, well, what are the facts? How are you going to use those facts? What are people coming out with? And how are you going to use that to your advantage? So it's more of like, I would say festering to become, how are you going to use this information to better, you know, your company or yourself, essentially.
So you graduated in 2019 at York's famous Minster, and then decided to do a master's, the first ever i2i student to do so. Why?
I think for me, it was kind of one of those things that, funnily enough, I did do a master's because I did get a master's degree in 4 years. So, well, in a year technically. So when all my buddies finished up, you know, their bachelor's degree, I already had my master's degree.
Yeah.
But definitely one of the main aspects for me, I think, was, funnily enough, football. I mean, I wanted to develop another year. I wanted to kind of get in there and kind of develop another year. And unfortunately, it didn't really work out how I expected. But again, I am kind of the guinea pig essentially. But I think it did pay off for me as well. I had a lot of shoulder issues, so I think training 3 times a week really kind of helped me out with my shoulder problems and everything else. So I think that was the first year I never was actually injured. Was because I only trained 2-3 times a week. So you know, it's kind of like a good, but also, you know, a bad thing as well. But definitely, I think it was because of football. I wanted to do another year, but as well as I have that master's underneath my belt now. which is another great thing to fall back on. I don't think if it wasn't for the 1 year master's, I would have never done my master's, to be honest, if it wasn't for that. So it was definitely worth it in the aspect of, doing that, as well as I somehow met my missus as well from that master's degree. So who knows, what kind of happens. But I mean, it was a great aspect of it, that's for sure.
So after finishing your 4 years at York St John, you then become another first for i2i. You're actually now part of the recruitment team, aren't you? Looking for the next batch of student athletes to come to the UK. Are you enjoying that so far?
Yeah, I am enjoying it. It is a good, a good aspect. I think it's interesting to see, where I was and, how everything kind of came into fruition. It is a little bit different here, obviously, with COVID and everything else like that. And I'm excited to go back to the US at some point and, go over and maybe talk to the guys and everything else like that, which is great as well. But definitely for me, it's also a good thing of just seeing their growth. This will be my first ever cohort that I'm bringing in, and I'm really excited to see their growth and see how far they can get, see how much they can develop, and see what the end product is, rather than, although I've experienced the end product, everybody is different. Like I said before, a while ago, everybody's different. Everybody has their own way of doing things. So for me, it's always interesting just to see, what their end product is. Have we, developed them? Have we fulfilled their potential, and things like that.
I mean, it must be pretty easy for you then, because you've been through the whole program. It must be fairly
Yeah, I
straightforward.
guess it is easy in some aspects of things. It definitely It's definitely different, but it's definitely nice just to hear, the guys and see how excited they are about the program. Because I know I exactly was, and I do know that whole kind of college pain that they're going through, especially in the U.S. because everything's privatized in the U.S., especially college and stuff like that. It's an absolute nightmare. You've got to go over and apply to colleges. You got to do this. You got to do that, and it's just an absolute nightmare.
Going back to your experiences for a moment, what were the main highlights of the program for you that you'll kind of cherish forever and never forget? It could be a number of things, I guess.
I think one of the definitely things was, playing in a lot of the showcase games, playing as many as I could, like Liverpool, Hull City, as well as Wolverhampton. Those are definitely ones that I am always going to remember, I think, and there's a lot of times people are going to say it, as well as I think lifelong friends wise, Ingy, Bry, Jono, I've always, got those guys. I've got a whole i2i family, essentially, not even just those three. But those three, I've been with the longest. So, but I've got all of them. I've got, Chris, Bunty, and all of them. So,
Don't leave anyone out.
Yeah, I know. I'm like trying to remember everybody's name, but no, I mean, all of them, to be honest, and the whole recruitment team, like you, whenever I met you and everything else like that. But it's definitely one of those things. I mean, one of the things about the Red Squad as well, and, not only with the trip to Europe and everything else like that, would be the Barcelona trip that we did. That was always great, although I didn't get to play much because of my shoulder. It was just good to be around the guys, and as well as with you coming in with your glasses that one night. But
We'll talk about that, Ian.
it was really good. I mean, it was good. I mean, I think one of the biggest things for me is definitely, getting my master's is definitely one of them, and as well as somehow by the stroke of luck, being able to stay here, and as well as playing for, I wouldn't say playing for, but training with Tagcaster, and getting those kind of opportunities. I don't think, if it wasn't for i2i, or if it wasn't for, me being here for so long, I would be able to have that kind of opportunity, especially with Ingy or anybody else. Who knows what's going to happen in the future. I hope it's positive, but it's part of the game.
So if there are any aspiring soccer athletes listening to this, or parents for that matter, what advice would you give them, bearing in mind, like I've said previously, you've been through the whole procedure?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing especially would be, don't be afraid to take a leap of faith. Now with parents, it's a bit different. My parents were, my mom wasn't the same. My dad was probably a lot of the parents, but they didn't want me to go. It's hard to kind of take that next step, where my mom was just like, get out. But she did not want me in the house anymore. But my dad didn't want me to go. It's definitely kind of like a harder kind of aspect of it. But I mean, especially with athletes that are looking for colleges, everything else like that, you just gotta keep going. You gotta keep trying. It's the only really thing that you can do. I mean, for me, I've gotten quite lucky, I think, especially with i2i accepting me and everything else like that. You know, I luckily didn't have to do as much as I think a lot of other people do. I know I was still handing out highlights to coaches and, you know, everything else. And it's kind of hard to, because, you know, you're afraid of getting rejected, but it's just part of the process. I mean, you just gotta keep going. There's plenty of opportunities out there, and as well as, you know, you got to take a leap of faith every once in a while. Just be like, you know what, I'm just gonna try it. Let's just see how it goes. So that's essentially what I did with i2i. I was just like, I really don't have, you know, anywhere else to go, and might as well take a leap of faith and try it, and just to see how far I can get. So
Just finally, Ian, I've actually got a question for you. What was the biggest surprise about studying in England?
ooh,
Put you on the spot there.
I think the biggest surprise about studying in England was definitely kind of the culture and the way the social aspects work. I did kind of expect, because I was on the teacher trip as well, but I did kind of expect I had like a vague idea. But I think socially it's completely different than it is in the US. And as well as, you know, just the style of teaching, it's a lot more, I would say, personalized, rather than now you're just kind of another student. I think even with Northumbria, how big they are, after looking over their program and, you know, looking at everything from the recruitment team, you know, they're 30,000 students, but you still get brought into a room with a seminar of 10 people. So I think that really attests to the universities here, how they care more about the individual and the way that they develop, rather than, oh, well, you're just another student, you know, I don't even know who you are. So it's kind of one of those things, but definitely that was a big surprise to me. No, it's definitely different. It definitely takes some time. However, you know, if you just put in your time, I don't see why anybody wouldn't be fine at all. So
I think that'll just about do it, Ian. Thank you very much for joining us on the first ever i2i podcast.
no problem. Thanks for having me.